September 14th, a 19-year-old was attacked while she was out cutting grass. The attackers brutally assaulted her on a field near her home in Uttar Pradesh. The woman was found by her family, naked, bleeding, and paralyzed. Her tongue was slit and her spine was broken. 2 weeks after the gang rape, she died on Tuesday at the Safdarjung Hospital, New Delhi. Every 15 minutes, one woman reports rape in India in 2018, according to a government data released in January. The woman was a Dalit, meaning she was from the lowest Indian caste, and the suspects who lived next door are from the higher caste. The use of sexual violence as a tool of oppression against a lower caste has been on the rise in India, particularly in Uttar Pradesh. According to human rights organizations, including United Nations Human Rights Council, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International, Dalit women are particularly vulnerable to caste-based violence and discrimination. Protests have erupted all over India after the death of the young girl. Around 300 protesters from the Bhim Army, a party campaigning for the rights of Dalits, gathered outside the hospital in Delhi, demanding justice. India remains the most dangerous country in the world for women. In the recent past, gruesome cases of sexual assault have surfaced from all corners of the country. Years after years, the cases increase. The introduction of harsher penalties for rape and sexual assault has done little to curb the attacks. Krishangi Sinha, Democracy News Live, New Delhi.
Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to It Matters, our evening show on Democracy News Live. It's not such a good evening when you hear of issues such as these. India remains a very dangerous place for women. In 2012, protests erupted across the country following a fatal gang rape of a woman in a bus in New Delhi. This was followed again in Hyderabad, where a veterinarian was raped. Every year, there are thousands and thousands of women who are raped in India. This recent one is of a 19-year-old. She's been gang raped. It is sad to see a society, that boasts of thousands of years of tradition, culture, history, be standing at the place it is standing today, where it's known as the rape country of the world. The real numbers are really high. Every 15 minutes, a woman gets raped and reports it, which means the numbers that are not being reported are even higher. And I think we need to take a closer look and begin understanding on what's wrong, what are the actions that need to be taken to stop these people from going out and doing what they're doing. It's brutal, it's savage, and it's not certainly a civilized society. I'm joined by two people. Yogita Bhayana, she is a activist. She works with a lot of young women. And also joining me today is Kaushal. She's written a book called Why Men Rape. I welcome you both to the show. Yogita, can I ask you to weigh in first? You have been sitting outside Parliament, you've been going out there, you've been protesting. Explain to me, why is this continuing to happen? People have seen, people are sent to the gallows. Why does this continue going on and on?
Rohit, as you rightly said, there is nothing good about this evening, and I am also running short of words in the sense of, seeing the brutality and another brutality this morning, midnight, whatever you can say, and what the family might go through over years to prove themselves. Right now, the cops are, defending their act of cremating this girl. I mean, they did not even give the final, how do I say, the respect to this girl that at least the family could have done whatever rituals as per the, religion they follow. I mean, where are we standing? I mean, it is hard to even discuss these things. You can imagine in my history of working with so many similar cases, I have never seen such a harsh behavior in the sense that where cops will create a human chain to prevent the family members to even see their own daughter towards the end. I mean, So this only can happen in India. This can only happen in Uttar Pradesh, and it is like a movie scene, which we have to believe that yes, it is happening. Hard to believe, but this happens. So I mean, where are the naras of that Beti Bachao Beti Padhao? Now, after so much of outrage, you see all these statements coming from the leaders. Were they sleeping? This girl, Rohit, could have been saved. I will equally blame this Ajay Singh Bisht and prime minister of this country equally to be blamed, because this girl, if she was brought, even okay, we expect that they can't prevent, we know that they can't prevent, they are a big failures, they can't prevent cases, but now that case had happened, they could have they could have saved this girl, they could have brought her to Sabdajang much earlier. I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling ashamed, because I raised this case myself. I was the only one, and Rohini Singh, we raised this case when it happened, it occurred. I was in touch with Hathras police on phone because I was in isolation. I was constantly following up, but I had no idea that this is the state of this girl, that she needs immediate treatment in, not in a district hospital, but in a good establishment. So I am
So
feeling guilty that
let
how these
me
people can live without guilt. How these people
Yogita, let me
can live.
stop you there. So what Yogita is trying to say is once the rape happened and there was opportunity to save this girl, but the police obviously was lackadaisical. It put her in a small hospital, UP hospitals. If I don't know if any of you have ever stepped into one, I've stepped into many. These hospitals have no treatment centers. They have almost got no beds. They sometimes have no equipment and they are in really bad shape. So if they really wanted to save her, they should have rushed her to a central hospital in the country and possibly saved her. So what Yogita is trying to bring out is that there is not, you couldn't prevent it. Obviously, the criminals are not scared of you. They go out and rape because they know you're possibly out there to protect them. And in this case, this is a rape of a lower caste girl. And this has been a big ongoing challenge. Higher castes continue to suppress lower castes, and sometimes to teach them a lesson, they will actually go out and rape lower caste women. And this is what we see possibly here as well. Now, explain to me, when you reached out to Hathras police and you were trying to negotiate with them what is being done, they did not inform you that her medical condition was really poor.
So I was only informed that okay, they are taking up the case, they have arrested these criminals, they have put another IPC they had added, so they were very much social media active police station, I must say that, but mentally they are still the same. They did not even take the victim to the hospital. It when she for unfortunately the family of such strata, they don't know their rights, so rather than taking her to straight to the hospital where she couldn't have been denied the treatment, but they took her to the police station. She waited outside the police station for 2 hours while the parents were negotiating with the cops in the sense of getting the FIR registered. When they said okay, now your daughter needs hospitalization, you take your daughter to the hospital, rather than police taking the girl to the hospital, the family had to do it. So she waited outside. And I mean, the weather was so bad last week, it was so humid, and I mean, with these kind of injuries, she waited outside police station, then she was taken to the hospital. I mean, even if they talk about the evidences, what kind of evidences are left when the family has to do everything? Most of the evidences are getting tampered. Here it was an open and shut case. Her body was found nude. She was bleeding from her private parts. What else do you want to know? You can delete the sections, the IPCs later on, but get the girl treatment. I mean, they did not update me. It is my lack also. I would rather say that I was getting to know from the people on the ground there that she's stable. But we had no idea the gravity of the situation, because she could even give the statement. It means she could have been saved. I also feel there's a foul play, because if you look at her videos, she is not that in critical stage, in the sense she could have been saved, in the sense if the right treatment could have been given. Here I'm thinking extremely other way around. I'm thinking that they have done something to her. I'm talking about the cops. So Here, cops are only criminal. What are we talking and what are we discussing? So,
We talk about taking the CBI taking up cases where there is an actor which dies. But here, a central agency is not going to be possibly called in to investigate this. And it's not going to be on everybody's, top agenda. It won't take the top parts of the show where people are saying these cops need to be investigated. They possibly is foul play around them. Their phones need to be confiscated and tapped and see what conversations they were having with their seniors and what were the seniors doing. Should the DGP resign? Do you think the DGP should resign?
I think Chief Minister should resign. DGP is not enough because he's a complete failure of leadership, law and order. I mean, their priorities are different. So I don't even feel like calling this guy with his Yogi Ji title because Yogi is very pious. This guy, I don't know what to call it. So I mean, this is a time he should resign. I mean, he should definitely. I'm telling you again and again. I am feeling guilty. I'm not a government. I am not a system, but I am feeling guilty of not doing my bit completely. So you can imagine how can they live with this kind of a guilt. So I think not DGP. Definitely, he should. In this particular case, I think DIG should resign, and all the cops should be booked under IPC under 164 the IPC. They should also be booked. They should be punished equally, and the Yogi that CM should resign. The Ajay Singh Bish
So
should
what
resign.
So I think what you're making is a very strong point. There has been lots of lapses here, and that needs to be isolated. Let me bring in Tara here. Tara, you've done this book around the idea of women rape. When you look at this another case, and this has happened year after year, day after day, month after month, we see this all the time. What's going on? You spent a lot of years researching this. What's happening to India here?
What's happening to India? So, with Why Men Rape, an Indian undercover investigation, I spend a lot of time undercover with men who have raped. And, while I appreciate this law and order approach, and I'm watching your Astons that say we need for effective rape laws as I'm speaking. I think something. Our laws are great, and if at all we have to look at the legal system, we have to look at execution, we have to look at the police, we have to look at how long rape cases take, we have to look at the execution of law, because changing the law is the easiest thing to do. The hard work is actually to get those laws, to those progressive attitudes in our laws. And I'm not saying there are no failings in our laws. There are. We still condone marital rape. There's still issues. There are big and small issues. But my point is, from the cracks and the crevices of the law, what tends to happen is every time there's a rape, we talk of law and order. Change the law, hang the rapist. And I have a huge problem with this, because I don't think that the law is the answer. I think, unlike Yogita, I believe that it could have been prevented. What happened yesterday, and what's happening every day, and honestly, it's happening every day. I remember when I first started researching why men rape, I ended up speaking to a very famous, rape or whatever, women's activist. And he told me, he said, the only thing special about the Delhi gang rape is that it happened in Delhi to a Delhi upper caste girl. Indian women are raped and murdered in villages all the time. We just don't hear about it. And part of me wanted to wear, and I considered wearing black today. But if I was going to wear black for every day that an Indian woman is treated like this, I'd wear black every single day. This is happening all the time. So while a law and order approach is valid, and I see that, and we need police and legal reforms, my thing is we need to deal with the cause. And this could have been prevented not only by stricter laws and stricter execution, but it could have been prevented through sexual education, through healthy education about gender rights, through an understanding of consent. And also, this government, which is particularly bigoted, needs to be held accountable for what it is setting as a standard of operation. So you cannot have the understanding that on the one hand we want women's rights and we claim to be interested in women's rights, but on the other hand, talking about caste and looking at the caste vote. You can't have that, because operation, I mean, just as much as oppressions are interlinked and intersectional, and this woman was a Dalit girl, just rural, poor, Dalit, etc. Just as much as oppressions are intersectional, so are privileges. So this man or these men, the men who raped her, like the police, are upper caste, and that's a huge thing in a village.
You
And
make a
this
very good point,
government
Tara. Tara, you make a very good point. The intersectional.
support upper caste. I mean, the government is upper caste, and it comes across in very many ways. So you can't say they're at all interested in the rights of women or the underprivileged, because it's all intersectional. And the Indian Dalit woman is at the lowest end of this chain, and the kind of stuff that happens to them, we don't even know. And I just barely scratched the surface, and I came away horrified. So yeah, I mean,
Tara, Tara,
I
Tara,
problem
just
with
leaving
this
out.
government is accountable.
Tara, I want to lead out of what you talked about in terms of could this have been prevented? And I know you guys are making different points, but I think you're still making the same point. Could it have been prevented if it didn't take 7 years to take Nirbhaya's, rapists to the gallows? It could have been prevented if people knew that if you go out and rape a woman tomorrow, you're going to be hanged, and it's not going to take you 7 years, 8 years to still live on, but there'll be a fast code. It'll happen in 10 days and you'll be gone. They possibly will be a little more careful. If this whole idea of, religious violence, caste violence, it has to be stemmed, then it has to be stemmed properly. But you cannot expect the society to be bigoted, as you said. In one section, we will allow you to do whatever you want to do when you're, going out and killing protesters. But on the other side, we're going to, have this whole, organized system. This is what happens when your society becomes bigoted. You see bigotry across the network. And so, Yogita, do you think things like this can be prevented if people are taken through fast courts or through a fast track court? I remember I met somebody at, with you. There was a girl who had been raped and killed, and her parents were still seeking justice, and it had taken many, many years. Do you think this is a better way of finding justice for people like that? I think we've lost Yogita there. The network possibly is down. Tara, I'm going to come back to you. Do you think if she was jailed, if the victim, if the perpetrators of the Nirbhaya were sent to the gallows much earlier, do you think it would really impact and prevent?
I'm going to ask you a question, Rohit. If somebody told you tomorrow that you were allowed to go out and murder someone, no consequences, would you do it? You
Depends.
would.
I don't think so. I may not.
My answer to this question is always no, I will not do it. And I think
No.
that moral code that is instilled in us from our childhood and from our conditioning is super important. So the law and the fear of the law and sending people to the gallows or whatever, not that I believe in capital punishment or that it will do anything, that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is, how are we raising our men and boys? How are we raising them? And then, if you look at the cause of rape, and traditionally it's seen as an intersection of anger, power, and sex. If you look at the cause of rape like that, where we have a government that encourages anger, that encourages, anger-based issues. Rage is a thing that we really seem to be excited about. Rage is what we promote. We want this, anger and kill the Muslims and kill the lower castes, and we like this. We promote it. We see it on Twitter. We see it in our society. We see it in our politics. So if that is the way the world functions today, it will definitely have an impact on the way we treat women. And this is just the way we treat women in this country is just a reflection of many, many greater ills. And we look at everybody in this country through a power lens. So a Dalit woman is seen through a power lens. And again, if you see her, you can look at it two ways. Through patriarchy, we see her as someone without rights. Okay, she's the least important thing. I mean, maybe an animal has more rights than her, right? So through patriarchy, we see her like that, which is why it was easy to murder her. If we see her from a caste lens and a power and anger lens, Dalit women or Dalit people getting equal rights is angering the upper caste. And this is just part of, sending them a message. So, in whatever way we see it, there is a factor of culture, and culture is endorsed by people up at the top. You see, I'm not saying previous governments were not bigoted. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, uh, they didn't do it as openly and publicly as this one. And I think what our leaders say in public makes it normal. So a few generations ago, I felt that it was, even if you were minorly bigoted or minorly casteist, it was something you were kind of ashamed of, because it was not something you could say in public.
You would hide it possibly.
Yeah,
You
you
would
might have
possibly hide
been. Like, I realize that, my grandparents' attitudes, sometimes I look at them and I'm like, oh, but it's okay. It's okay. They're learning and they have learned. And all of these years with their secular kids and now very secular grandchild, they have learned and they're opening their minds. But now again, when you have a government that makes it okay, then it's okay and normal. And you also see yourself in a majority. So this is now normalized. And I have a
So
huge problem.
I want to pick up Tara. Let me split this up in terms of when you talk about patriarchy, and that's so ingrained in our system, in our society. A woman's always looked at lesser. She's not as important. The man's career is more important. The man's needs are more important. His food is more important. Man comes first. The man won't get up and cook for the woman. The woman needs to go cook for the man. It's just ingrained in our society as a system. And when it comes down to decision making, it completely lies with men. And I think that in itself kind of adds, and I think that's the point you're trying to make, that patriarchy is so well ingrained, and I'd say poorly ingrained in our systems, that we actually see it finally being translated into issues where a woman's treated as, we're going to teach the Dalits a lesson, let's rape a woman. Let's tell them who we are. We are bosses. And I think that bigotry goes across systems. And I think that's the point you're trying to make. I take your point. Now tell me, where, if you, after your research around and writing your book, where would you start first if you want to fix
Well,
this?
clearly, we need to focus on the men and boys. Okay? We can keep empowering women and telling them to claim the world, but unless we train men and boys to understand that women are okay and equal, and it's okay to see them in public spaces, they will continue to perpetrate violence against women who cross the line. They're, as they say, we're training our women to be more empowered, but we are not training boys to be prepared for women like this. And now, if you look at the role of sexual violence, see, sexual violence, of course, being raped or whatever is horrific. But sexual terrorism, the threat and fear of sexual violence, that's the definition of sexual terrorism. Sexual terrorism has its own unique role. It keeps women away from spaces that they're not supposed to claim. So a lot of friends, I mean, a lot of people I spoke to after the Delhi gang rape, a lot of women friends were like, now my parents don't let me go out at night because they're so afraid. Now, what does sexual terrorism serve to do? It keeps women in check. And unfortunately, sexual violence and sexual terrorism is going to increase. It is going to increase because, violence is a sign of change in society. And absolute peace is the sign of status quo. So we are changing. Women are claiming spaces we were not supposed to claim. We're loud and proud. So we need to educate our men and boys. And even in this, it's easy to say how we need to educate men and boys, and how do we do that? And we can talk about the role of NGOs. We need to talk about the role of schools. We need to talk about all this. But if you actually ask me, the smallest thing we can do, to deal with sexual violence, or to prevent men from becoming perpetrators of sexual violence, is we need to focus on eradicating domestic violence at home and corporal punishment for the kids. Because what kids learn, and this is a small thing, I know, and I know it sounds so trivial when we're talking about rape culture and rapes like this, but you know what kids learn when you teach them violence when they're younger is that you teach them that there's an association between power and violence. There's an association between love and violence. Apparently, your father loves your mother, but he's okay with beating her. And apparently, when you become powerful, like the teacher or the father that's beating them, it's okay for you to also beat. So it's a cycle that we need to stop. We also need to take we need to stop the anger and therefore the violence at the root and at childhood. But we also need to focus a little bit more on healthy egalitarian love, romantic love, and also love across. I mean, we see the rage in this country and how it is expressed in all avenues.
Healthy
Whether it's
egalitarian love. Explain that to me, Tara. Explain that to me a bit.
healthy egalitarian love. So there's a reason. I mean, I always say this, hippies chale gaye, mujhe chhod gaye. But I have been studying this. And what happens is, so if we look at, so the older way of looking at gender violence is that we perpetrate gender violence because we don't humanize the victim. Like we see them as less than human. Newer studies on gender violence say the exact opposite. On not gender violence, violence in general. And this has only come up in the last 10 years. Newer studies about violence say the exact opposite, that the reason people perpetrate violence is because they know fully well that the person is human and has humanity and feelings and is capable of feeling the violence. Otherwise, why would you enjoy it? Why would you enjoy hurting someone if you think they're a piece of stone and don't care, right? So, my only, and through Women Rape, I've always said I'm only taking academic research and putting it in a conversational manner. So I have no new insights to offer in Women Rape, except this, that I think both reasons are true. So both reasons, like you see the victim as perfectly human and you see the victim as an object. Both things are true, right? Why I say this is this: when a man, for instance, wants in a marriage situation, when a man wants sex and there's no anger, there's no violence involved, it's just sex, and she doesn't, a man will say, okay, in a choice between her desires and mine, I'm more important, and so marital rape in the traditional sense will happen, and it's fine. The other thing is, if you see them as fully human, then anger, when there's violence and anger involved, and you're trying to prove a point or express an emotion, that's also a cause of rape. Now, when you love someone, it is harder to objectify them and say, hey, my desires are more than your desires. So it's harder to objectify them. And it's also harder to want to be this angry and this violent with them that you would rape them. So when I say love, it's not the Bollywood stalking love. I'm just saying when you're in a
I
relationship
take your
that
point.
is
I take your
healthy and
point. So Tara has taken this a bit ahead as well in terms of where there is still some sense of respect. But what we are also talking about today is the violent rape by these upper caste men of a Dalit girl. What's missing is quick action. What's missing is the dehumanizing way of looking at it. The cops were not on the ball. They took a long time. They held the girl right outside the police station. So I think that whole idea of a patriarchal society and how they treat women, and then how this the rape victim got held outside the police station and now is dead is very, very sad. There, across this country, people are demanding the UP government to take action on itself, be responsible for what it has done. And I think that's the idea today. Thank you, Tara, for joining me. And I know Yogita's had a power failure, so her network went down. But I think this is very, very important. And thank you for coming on the show. Good night. And
Thanks, Rohit.